Have you ever spent hours studying, only to forget everything the next day? Or pulled an all-nighter, cramming for an exam, but still walked out feeling like you learned nothing? I've been there, and trust me, it's frustrating. But here's the truth: studying doesn't have to be painful or endless. What if I told you there's a smarter way to study, one that doesn't involve burning yourself out or losing sleep? You can actually ace your exams with less stress and effort. Sounds too good to be true? Stick around, because in this video, I'm going to share 20 game-changing tips that transformed the way I study and helped me go from struggling to acing my exams, without feeling overwhelmed or exhausted. I remember my first year of college, late nights with highlighters everywhere, stacks of textbooks I barely understood, and endless stress. I thought studying meant more hours, more effort. But no matter how hard I tried, nothing seemed to stick. Then I realized the problem wasn't about how much time I spent, but how I was studying. I had to change my approach. And today, I'm going to share those exact tips that helped me study smarter, not harder, so you can do the same. Tip number 1: show up to class. This might sound obvious, but it's the most important. I once had a professor who always emphasized that the exam content came directly from the lectures, not the textbook. So, I started attending every class, taking notes actively, and engaging with the material as it was taught. Here's the kicker: I never opened the textbook for that class and still managed to get an A. Why? Because I listened carefully, asked questions, and took solid notes that helped me later. When you engage actively during lectures, you're getting a mini study session right there, saving you hours of self-study later. Think about it this way: each class you attend and engage with is like cutting down on hours of work for you. Tip number 2: make your own study guide. If your professor hands out a study guide, great. But if not, don't worry, just create one. Whenever your professor emphasizes something in class, jot it down. Key definitions, repeated phrases, bolded terms, these are usually indicators of what will be on the exam. When you create your study guide, don't just write down the facts, organize them visually. Use bullet points, color coding, charts, and mind maps. For example, if it's a math formula, highlight it in red. If it's a definition, use blue. This visual organization makes it much easier to recall under pressure and reduces the overwhelm. Tip number 3: use your study guide effectively. Don't just read over it mindlessly. Instead, rewrite key points in your own words. Then, cover up the answers and test your memory. This process is much more effective than rereading. And here's a bonus tip: teach the material to someone else. If you can explain it simply, you've truly mastered it. This method, known as the Feynman Technique, was popularized by the physicist Richard Feynman, who believed that if you can't explain a concept in simple terms, you don't fully understand it. Take a complicated concept from your study guide and explain it as if you were teaching a 10-year-old. If you struggle, it means you need to break it down further. Tip number 4: quiz yourself. Instead of reading notes over and over, quiz yourself. Spend 1 solid hour testing your knowledge. The key is active recall, asking yourself questions and trying to answer them from memory. This strengthens your long-term retention. Studies have shown that quizzing yourself is far more effective than passive reading. I also recommend using the Pomodoro Technique. Study for 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break. This helps maintain focus and keeps your brain fresh. Tip number 5: change your study environment. Your brain associates different spaces with different activities. For example, your bed is for sleeping, not for studying. I used to study in my room, but once I started studying in a different environment, like a cafe or a library, my focus improved dramatically. A new setting tricks your brain into seeing study time as something fresh, making it easier to concentrate. Even if you must study at home, designate a specific area for studying. And here's a quick tip: try the 5-minute rule. Commit to studying for just 5 minutes. Most of the time, once you get started, you'll end up studying longer. Let me share a story with you. I used to think studying meant spending countless hours flipping through textbooks, hoping something would stick. Then I came across Cal Newport's book Deep Work, where he talks about the importance of focused, distraction-free work. He said something that completely changed my mindset. If you can't learn to focus, you can't learn efficiently. That hit me hard. I realized that it wasn't about the number of hours spent studying, it was about the quality of focus I'd put in. So, I started cutting out distractions, following the Pomodoro Technique, and using active recall, and guess what? My grades improved exponentially. Tip number 6. Use the Pomodoro Technique. This method is a game changer for anyone who struggles with focusing for long periods. Here's how it works. Set a timer for 25 minutes and commit to studying or working on one specific task during that time. When the timer goes off, take a 5-minute break. Repeat this cycle. The beauty of the Pomodoro Technique is that it breaks your study time into manageable chunks. It's like a sprint instead of a marathon, so you stay focused and energized throughout the study session. Plus, research shows that taking regular breaks actually increases productivity and reduces mental fatigue. By limiting the study session to a set amount of time, you'll avoid burnout and increase your ability to concentrate. Tip number 7. Use spaced repetition. If you've ever tried cramming the night before an exam, you know it rarely works. That's because information doesn't stick long-term when it's crammed into your brain at the last minute. Instead, spaced repetition is a technique where you review the material at increasing intervals. You start by reviewing the material after 1 day, then 3 days, then 7 days, and so on. This technique is based on the concept of the spacing effect, which states that information is better retained if it is studied several times over a longer period rather than in one sitting. You can use apps like Anki or Quizlet to help implement spaced repetition into your study routine. I personally found this method to be a game changer because it helped me remember information far beyond the exam date. Tip number 8. Create a study schedule and stick to it. One of the biggest challenges when it comes to studying is finding the time to do it. But here's the thing, if you don't make time for studying, you'll keep putting it off. By scheduling study sessions in advance, you're ensuring that you stay on track and cover all the material. Break down your tasks into smaller chunks and assign specific time blocks to each subject. Don't forget to include breaks to refresh your mind. I also recommend scheduling study-free time so you can relax and recharge. The key to creating a study schedule is flexibility. If something comes up, adjust your schedule rather than abandoning it altogether. This helps you stay consistent and on top of your academic responsibilities. Tip number 9. Minimize distractions. This one might seem simple, but it's often overlooked. How many times have you found yourself distracted by your phone, social media, or random notifications while studying? I used to be guilty of this all the time. But the reality is, every distraction you allow during your study session takes you longer to refocus. Studies show that it can take up to 25 minutes to regain focus after a distraction. So, before you start studying, take a few simple steps to reduce distractions. Put your phone in airplane mode or in another room, close all unnecessary browser tabs, and find a quiet study spot. If you can, use tools like focus mode apps to block distracting websites. The less you're distracted, the more you'll get done in less time. Tip number 10. Stay consistent and build a habit. The secret to mastering any skill, including studying, is consistency. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, talks about the power of habit stacking. He suggests tying a new habit to an existing one. For example, I linked my morning coffee routine to my study habit. Every time I made coffee in the morning, I would sit down and study for 30 minutes. At first, it was tough, but over time, it became second nature. The key is to make studying a part of your daily routine so it feels like a normal part of your day, not something you need to force. Consistency is what will carry you through when motivation fades. I remember a time when I struggled with procrastination, especially when exams were coming up. I would sit down to study, but my mind would wander. I couldn't focus, and I'd put it off until the last minute. That's when I started applying these strategies. By creating a study schedule, sticking to the Pomodoro Technique, and using spaced repetition, I was able to reduce procrastination and actually feel good about studying. The shift from procrastination to consistent study habits was life-changing. It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter and making studying a part of your routine. And that's what ultimately helped me achieve the grades I wanted. To drive this point home, let me share some insights from experts in the field. Cal Newport, in his book Deep Work, says the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task is a skill that allows you to quickly master complicated information and produce better results in less time. This is why techniques like the Pomodoro Technique and focused study time work so well. You're training your brain to focus and learn effectively. Similarly, James Clear, in Atomic Habits, explains that you do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. So, if you build a system that supports consistent studying, you'll naturally achieve the results you want. Tip number 11: break down complex topics into simple chunks. This is a technique that changed the way I approach difficult subjects. When you're faced with a complex concept, like a tricky math formula or an in-depth theory, it can feel overwhelming. Instead of trying to understand everything at once, break it down into smaller parts. For example, when I was studying for my calculus exam, I would divide a big problem into smaller steps. Step 1: understand the concept behind the formula. Step 2: work through examples. Step 3: review each part slowly and methodically. When I took this approach, I realized that complex topics weren't as intimidating as they first appeared. The key is to master one small piece at a time before moving to the next. Tip number 12: focus on understanding, not just memorizing. Memorization is important, but it's not enough. If you're only memorizing information without understanding it, you're limiting your ability to apply the knowledge in real-life situations. This concept was reinforced when I read Make It Stick: The Science of Successful Learning by Peter C. Brown. The authors emphasize that understanding leads to better long-term retention than simple memorization. One of the ways I started focusing on understanding was by asking myself, why does this concept matter? For example, in my economics class, I didn't just memorize supply and demand curves. I explored how these concepts apply in real-world scenarios, like during a market crash or the introduction of new government policies. When I started to ask why, everything started to click, and I remembered the material much better. Tip number 13: take care of your health. It's easy to forget, but your physical health is directly tied to how well you can study and retain information. You can't expect your brain to function at its best if you're not sleeping well, eating healthy, or staying active. I used to study late into the night, drinking caffeine to stay awake, but I noticed my focus and productivity dropping after a while. That's when I started prioritizing my physical well-being. I began exercising regularly, eating nutritious meals, and getting enough sleep. The results were amazing. My energy levels increased, and I felt more alert during study sessions. When you take care of your body, your brain works better, and that leads to better study results. Tip number 14: use visual aids. Whether it's mind maps, charts, or diagrams, visual aids can make complex information much easier to understand and remember. Studies show that people tend to retain more information when it's presented in a visual format. For instance, in my biology class, I used diagrams to understand how different systems in the human body worked. When I created a diagram showing how blood flows through the circulatory system, the process became much clearer. I also used color-coded charts and graphs to highlight key information, and I found that this visual strategy greatly enhanced my retention. It's like turning your study materials into a work of art that helps you grasp the material faster. Tip number 15: find your best learning style. Every student is different. Some people learn best by reading, others by listening, and some by doing. The key to studying efficiently is to understand your own learning style and adapt your study methods accordingly. I used to think I had to study the same way everyone else did, sitting with my textbook and taking notes. But once I started experimenting, I realized I was a kinesthetic learner. I needed to engage with the material physically. So, I started creating flashcards, drawing diagrams, and using hands on activities to reinforce what I was learning. This was a game changer. If you're unsure about your learning style, here are some general guidelines. Visual learners benefit from charts, diagrams, and written notes. Auditory learners do well with lectures, podcasts, and discussions. Kinesthetic learners need to move, use hands-on activities, and work with physical objects. I also discovered that I could combine learning styles. For example, I would listen to educational podcasts while walking, which allowed me to both absorb information and stay active. Don't be afraid to experiment and find what combination of methods works best for you. The more you tailor your studying to your strengths, the better your results will be. Tip number 16: teach someone else. One of the best ways to solidify your understanding of a subject is to teach it to someone else. It sounds counterintuitive. How can teaching someone else help you? But trust me, it works. When you teach, you have to process the information at a deeper level. You can't just regurgitate facts, you have to explain them clearly and concisely. This forces you to really understand the material, and any gaps in your knowledge will become apparent. I remember once I was studying for a biology exam, and I was really struggling with the topic of cell division. I tried reading the textbook, but nothing was sticking. So I asked my friend if I could teach them about the topic. As I started explaining, I realized I didn't understand the process as well as I thought. This forced me to go back, review, and find a simpler way to explain it. The more I taught, the clearer the concept became in my mind, and I scored an A on the exam. It doesn't have to be a formal teaching session either. Find a study buddy, or even a family member, and try explaining what you've learned to them. If you can teach it to someone else, you'll truly understand it yourself. Tip number 17: practice mindfulness and stress management. Let's face it, studying can be stressful. The pressure to perform well, the fear of not remembering information, and the constant feeling of needing to catch up can take a toll on your mental health. That's why mindfulness and stress management are essential tools for studying effectively. Mindfulness allows you to stay present and focus on the task at hand, rather than worrying about everything you still have to do. One of the most helpful mindfulness techniques I found was deep breathing. Before every study session, I took 5 minutes to focus on my breath and calm my mind. This simple practice reduced my stress levels significantly and helped me stay focused during long study sessions. Another technique that worked wonders was progressive muscle relaxation (PMR). You start by tensing your muscles, holding for a few seconds, and then slowly relaxing them. This helps release physical tension and signals your body to relax, which can significantly improve your focus and energy levels. I started doing this before my study sessions, and it helped me feel more relaxed and in control, especially during stressful periods like exam week. Stress management doesn't just involve calming your mind in the moment. It's about setting yourself up for success. One of the best strategies is planning and time management. When you know exactly what you need to do and how much time you have, it reduces anxiety and allows you to approach each task with clarity and confidence. I started using a planner to organize my study sessions, and this really helped me manage my time more effectively, so I wasn't cramming the night before exams. If you're feeling overwhelmed, remember that it's okay to take a break. I've had moments where I felt like I was drowning in work, but stepping away for just a few minutes to take a walk or get a drink of water helped me come back refreshed and more focused. Remember, taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your academic performance. Tip number 18: set specific goals for each study session. A lot of students sit down to study without a clear plan, and that often leads to wasted time and frustration. To study efficiently, set specific, achievable goals before you start. For instance, instead of saying, "I'm going to study biology," try setting a goal like, "I'm going to learn the first 3 chapters of the biology textbook today." This gives you a clear direction and prevents you from feeling aimless during your study time. A study session should have a goal, and that goal should be measurable. When you complete your goal, it gives you a sense of accomplishment and encourages you to keep going. Tip number 19. Stay organized with your study materials. This might seem obvious, but it's easy to overlook. When your notes are scattered, your textbooks are buried under a pile of papers, and your flashcards are all over the place, it can feel like an impossible task to get started. That's why staying organized is so important. Keep all your materials in one place and arrange them in a way that makes sense. For example, I use color-coded folders for each subject, so I can easily grab the right material when I need it. I also have a set of flashcards for each chapter I'm studying, which helps me test myself as I go. If you're looking for a way to organize your study materials digitally, apps like Notion or Evernote are excellent for keeping everything in one place. When your materials are organized, you save time, and you'll feel less stressed and more focused. Tip number 20. Take breaks and rest. One of the biggest mistakes students make is studying for hours on end without taking any breaks. We often think that the longer we study, the better the results will be, but this is far from the truth. Our brains aren't designed to focus for long periods without rest. In fact, studying nonstop can actually hinder your productivity, making it harder to retain information and leading to burnout. I used to fall into the trap of studying for hours, thinking that if I pushed myself hard enough, I'd remember everything. But I quickly realized that wasn't effective at all. Instead of cramming for hours, I started using the Pomodoro Technique, which involves studying for 25 minutes, followed by a 5-minute break. After 4 25-minute cycles, I would take a longer break, around 15 to 30 minutes. These short breaks allowed my brain to recharge, helping me stay focused and energized. I found that when I took these breaks, I could actually study for longer without losing focus, and my retention improved. So, don't be afraid to step away from your books for a bit. Giving yourself regular breaks isn't just about relaxation, it's about boosting your productivity and overall effectiveness. Taking breaks isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity for optimal performance. Research shows that the brain processes and consolidates information during rest periods. Without enough breaks, we risk mental fatigue and diminishing returns from our study efforts. When I first adopted the Pomodoro Technique, I was skeptical, but I soon noticed the difference. The 5-minute breaks weren't just about resting, they were about recharging my mental energy and keeping my focus sharp. I used those short breaks to stand up, stretch, grab a quick snack, or even walk around a bit. This kept me energized and helped prevent the study burnout that often comes from long, grueling sessions. Incorporating breaks into your study routine doesn't mean you're being lazy, it's an essential part of the learning process. You'll find that when you return to your study materials after a break, you're more alert and able to absorb information much more effectively. Tip number 21. Stay consistent and build momentum. Many students believe that cramming the night before an exam is a good strategy, but this rarely works in the long run. The key to effective studying is consistency. Instead of waiting until the last minute to study, try spreading your study sessions out over several days or even weeks. I used to rely on cramming, hoping to absorb everything at once, but that method always left me overwhelmed and stressed. When I started studying in smaller chunks every day, I noticed a huge difference. Not only did I retain more information, but I also felt less stressed and more confident as the exam approached. Consistency allows you to build momentum. The more you study regularly, the less overwhelming it feels. Think of it like exercising. If you go to the gym every day, working out becomes part of your routine. Likewise, when you build a steady study habit, it eventually becomes second nature, and your knowledge grows more effectively over time. Small, consistent efforts add up to big results. Consistency also means you're less likely to procrastinate, which is often the biggest hurdle students face. When you make studying a regular habit, it no longer feels like a daunting task. You'll start to build momentum over time, making studying feel more like a routine part of your day instead of a last-minute cram session. For me, this meant scheduling study sessions just like any other appointment in my day. By doing this, studying became part of my natural flow, and I no longer had to struggle with the anxiety of last-minute stress. Tip number 22. Use the power of visualization. Visualization is one of the most powerful techniques for improving your study habits and exam performance. Before you start studying or take an exam, take a moment to visualize your success. Picture yourself confidently answering questions on the test or explaining complex concepts to someone else. This mental exercise taps into the power of your mind to boost your confidence, reduce anxiety, and prime you for success. Athletes have used visualization techniques for years to prepare for big games, and students can use the same method to prepare for exams. I started using visualization before each of my exams, and the results were remarkable. Instead of feeling nervous or intimidated, I approached each test with a sense of calm confidence. I could clearly see myself performing well, and this shift in mindset helped me perform better under pressure. So, before your next exam or study session, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine yourself succeeding. This small change in your routine can make a huge difference in how you feel and perform. Visualization isn't just for athletes, it's a mental technique that anyone can use to boost performance. When you visualize yourself succeeding, you are mentally preparing for the task at hand. This process not only enhances your confidence, but it also helps you manage exam anxiety. Every time I visualized acing an exam, I felt more confident walking into the test room. It was almost like I had already succeeded in my mind. I encourage you to make visualization a daily habit, not just before exams. Picture yourself succeeding at the end of each study session. This practice will build your confidence, reduce stress, and prime you for success, making your academic journey feel much smoother. I want to share another story with you about the power of consistency and momentum. A few years ago, I was struggling with my final project for a class. I knew it was going to be a big task, and I was dreading it. But I decided to break the project into smaller, manageable tasks. Each day, I set aside an hour to work on it, no matter how much progress I made. At first, it felt slow, but over time, those small tasks added up. By the end of the week, I had made significant progress, and the project didn't feel overwhelming anymore. When the deadline came, I submitted a project I was proud of, and the experience taught me that building momentum every day leads to great results in the long run. Tip number 23: develop a positive mindset and believe in yourself. Your mindset plays a huge role in your academic success. If you believe you're not good at something, you're less likely to put in the effort needed to improve. On the other hand, if you believe you can improve through hard work, you're more likely to succeed. This concept is called the growth mindset, a term coined by psychologist Carol Dweck. I used to doubt my ability to do well in certain subjects, especially math. But once I shifted my mindset and believed that I could get better with practice, my performance improved dramatically. One technique I found helpful was writing down positive affirmations and placing them around my study space. Every time I saw one, I reminded myself that I was capable of mastering the material. As I've shared throughout this video, effective studying is about quality, not quantity. Dr. John Dunlosky, a cognitive scientist, has researched the science of learning extensively. He suggests that techniques like retrieval practice, testing yourself, spaced repetition, and interleaving, mixing up different subjects, are some of the most effective ways to retain information. Carol Dweck, in her book Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, also emphasizes the importance of having a growth mindset. When you believe that intelligence can be developed through hard work and learning, you're more likely to embrace challenges and improve your study skills. I've found that when you focus on developing a growth mindset and applying the right strategies, the results speak for themselves. Let's quickly recap the 23 tips we've covered. Show up to class and engage. Create your own study guide. Use your study guide actively. Quiz yourself. Change your environment. Use the Pomodoro Technique. Use spaced repetition. Create a study schedule. Minimize distractions. Build a study habit. Break down complex topics. Focus on understanding, not memorization. Take care of your health. Use visual aids. Find your best learning style. Teach someone else. Practice mindfulness and stress management. Set specific goals for each study session. Stay organized with your study materials. Take breaks and rest. Stay consistent and build momentum. Use the power of visualization. Develop a positive mindset and believe in yourself. I hope these tips help you study smarter and achieve the grades you've been dreaming of. Remember, it's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. Try these strategies, find what works best for you, and make them part of your routine. If you found these tips helpful, drop a comment below, share this video with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe for more educational content. Good luck, and I'll see you in the next video.